are you open to sharing what you do on a daily basis to keep yourself in check with yourself?
So as soon as I wake up in the morning, before I, start to think things like, oh, what's the time, and what do I have to do today? I immediately give gratitude for my pillowcase, my pillow, my mattress topper, and my bedding. So I'm intentionally pushing myself towards that oxytocin state rather than the cortisol state. As soon as I'm aware that I become awake, I then do deep breathing whilst I'm still in bed. And I really feel into like all the directions that I'm breathing in. And I just see like, is there any tension somewhere or...
So you're tuning into your body immediately.
Immediately, yeah.
You're not allowing yourself, I guess, often into the emails, the social media, the news where, you've lost touch with your body and you're right into your brain and your thoughts, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have my phone in my bedroom, and it's several floors down. So it's quite a while till I can get to my phone. And yeah, I got an old-fashioned alarm clock because I just didn't want to have to, that's people's biggest excuse, isn't it? I use my phone as my alarm clock.
So gratitude, breathing,
yeah.
And then?
Then I get up and I take my probiotic first thing because I have to give a 10-minute gap before I can eat or drink anything. And then I will look at my phone.
But what I love about that is what you have just said you do as a neuroscientist, former doctor, coach, right? With all your knowledge and experience of helping people, you have built into your life a practice, dare I say, a ritual each morning, whereby within minutes, it's not much. That gratitude is not much.
Yeah.
That breathing is not much. And, 10, 15 minutes later, you're on your phone, right?
Yeah.
That's very achievable for people.
Yeah. But I'll add that because I have that 10-minute gap until I can drink my cup of tea, that's why I look at my phone because I'm kind of waiting. But making my cup of tea, whether it's regular tea or matcha tea, whether I'm using mushroom powders or not, that is a ritual for me. That is like a sacred moment. Like the phone is left behind and I do that almost like a form of meditation.
Why?
I like rituals.
What is a ritual?
A ritual is something that you do intentionally. So it's not just a routine. It's something that you do regularly, but you do it very intentionally. And I actually stopped formally meditating when I realized that if you regularly meditate, then for 15 or 30 minutes in your day, you are being mindful. And for 23 and a half hours, you are not. So I try to bring rituals into my life so that it's like a patchwork quilt. There's moments of mindfulness throughout my day. And that to me is one of them. And also then when I drink the cup of tea, I savor it like so much. Like, so that, that's, okay, I've looked at my phone for a few minutes, but I've got another pause there.
Yeah.
And, then I'll go and get like ready for the day. But something that became like a real demarcation between work time and home time was the way that I would prepare my vegetables, peel them, chop them, think about what I'm going to cook. I've always done mindful. I don't know if you were raised the same way as me, but we had to say thank you to God before we took the first bite of food.
Yeah. Very, very similar. And obviously in our culture, there's also, depending on which family you're in, of course, there's also about not cooking in a stressed state, right?
Oh, yeah.
It's massive that the state you're in. I mean, we've been talking throughout this conversation about the state in which you're in impacts who you are in the world.
Yeah.
But our culture would have the belief, I think, that the state you're in when you cook impacts the quality of that food.
Totally.
Now, a skeptic will hear that and go, what a load of rubbish. You guys are doctors, you're a neuroscientist. What the hell are you talking about? What would you say to that person?
I would say to them that when you've got high levels of cortisol, the cortisol actually leaks out of your sweat into the atmosphere around you. So if you're in a bad mood and you're cooking and your family are about to come to the dinner table, then simply your elevated levels of cortisol that are leaking out, the particles are going to go in through their skin and stress them out too. And also, it's an opportunity for you to stir something mindfully. Like, I love making risotto because you've got to be so patient and measured. That to me, that is like the best form of cooking meditation. So there's an opportunity there for you to chop things slowly, to think about the size of the piece of vegetable that somebody's going to put in their mouth, to stir it, intentionally. But what you're doing instead is being agitated and, banging things and doing it quickly and making yourself more stressed out. And, of course, you could argue that it doesn't physically have like an impact on the food, but it's just not, it's not ideal.
Yeah, I love it. And look, for that skeptic, right? Well, we all know that feeling when we've walked into a room at work or at home where something's going down, right?
Yeah.
Where there's been an argument or you can feel it.
Yeah.
Right? So all you're doing is walking into a room. There's people there. There's air, right? But you can tell what the energy is in that room.
Yeah.
That's real. We all know that.
Yeah.
And that makes me think of what you just said about cortisol leaking out.
Yeah.
You mentioned as part of your morning ritual, you go to a cup of tea. Now, I go to a cup of coffee.
Mm-hmm.
And in my book on stress, I referred to caffeine and alcohol as forms of liquid stress.
Oh, nice term.
And so I'm interested. We spent a long time so far talking about stress, the brain, how it affects our physical health, our emotional well-being, all these kind of things. How do caffeine and alcohol affect these things?
Yeah, so I did think about giving up that morning cup of tea, but in the end, the enjoyment of it for me was so great that I just thought it's not going to benefit my life to give that one up. I only have one caffeinated drink a day, and I never have it after 10 a.m. So the reason for that is that the quarter life of caffeine is 12 hours. So 12 hours after you've had your last caffeinated drink, a quarter of it is still circulating in your blood and going to your brain and potentially disturbing your sleep. Now, the way that caffeine could contribute as liquid stress is that if you're already stressed and agitated, what drives agitation is basically caffeine and sugar. So in that state, if you are using coffee to keep you going, or you're drinking a lot of coffee because you're not really eating properly and you're trying to fill yourself up, then you're also like accumulating the amount of caffeine that's in your system. That, is not good. And I do see people who are stressed, like drinking a lot of coffee, and I definitely advise them to cut it down, but mostly focus on the last time slot that you would have a caffeinated drink. Alcohol. So people will, think that it relaxes you. They may even use it proactively to try to reduce stress. But actually it, suppresses activity in your prefrontal cortex. So your ability to regulate your emotions actually becomes lower, and your decision-making ability, is negatively affected by that. Alcohol is a neurotoxin, so it will actually be killing off brain cells. And the other thing is that, obviously because of COVID, we all know that we used alcohol gels to kill bacteria. So basically alcohol, like antibiotics and processed food, affects the good bacteria in your gut as well. And we've already talked about how that connects with, your intuition, your decision-making, and the effect on sleep as well. So,
of course.
Yeah. Although I have to say, from heart rate variability monitoring, I can tell you that not leaving a 2-hour gap between finishing eating and going to bed is as disruptive for your sleep as drinking alcohol before you go to bed.
Now, I know what heart rate variability is, but for someone who doesn't, please explain that first, and then let's elaborate on what you just said, because that's huge.
Yeah. So heart rate variability monitors are, I was using them during the financial crisis, I was using them on my banking clients. And at that time, they were quite clunky gel electrodes.
You had to put these. Yeah, I remember.
Yeah. But nowadays, people have those bracelets that basically are monitoring your heart rate and also an element of your heart rate, which is called the variability. So you and I, we may both have a heart rate of 60, but mine might be like a metronome, 1 a second, and yours might get faster sometimes, slower sometimes, and just vary. And the description that I've just made of you is a healthier state because you've got variability. That's
counterintuitive, isn't it? Because you would initially think, I want my heart beating like a metronome.
Yeah.
I don't want any variation. I want it to be but, right on time.
Yeah.
But it's the opposite that we want.
That seems to correlate more with being in the sympathetic state, which is more the fright, flight, fight. And the fact that like you're adaptable, you've got variation. If something good happens, it's, then it changes. If something bad happens, you can adapt to it. That's kind of a benefit. So these sorts of monitors, they can give you trends over time, but the ones that I used to use show like down to each 15 minutes, whether you're in stress, recovery, light physical activity or heavy physical activity. And so the recovery period is like psychological relaxation. And so I did a few experiments on myself. Like I did a few with jet lag and different types of sleeping aids. And I did one where I had no alcohol, 1 unit of alcohol and 3 units of alcohol. And I compared them. And I didn't do this one intentionally, but I went to the theatre with someone and they were happy to eat afterwards, which, I finished eating by 8. So this was kind of starting to eat really late. And by the time I got home, it was late and I couldn't, at that time, I didn't know this. So I came home, it was late. I went to bed, couldn't sleep for 2 hours. And when I looked on my heart rate variability monitor, it looked like I'd had 3 units of alcohol because it was just like 2 hours of red stress before I actually fell asleep. And now that I know that, I'm very, very conscious that if I haven't digested my food, I know I won't sleep. So I'm conscious of always trying to leave that gap. When it's not possible for various reasons, like recently I was filming on the Navajo Nation, basically living out of a van. And when we got to a motel, we hadn't eaten like for a long time, so we had to eat. And I worked out that I needed to get 8 hours of sleep to be good for the filming the next day. But ideally, I needed to stay awake for 2 hours to let my food digest. And I had this book about the Navajo people that I needed to get through as well. So I thought, okay, I'm going to end up going to sleep at 1, which is really, really late for me. But I can read the book for 2 hours because I'm not going to sleep anyway. And I'll still get 8 hours sleep because we're not having an early start. So, I kind of work it out like that.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, what it really speaks to me is that you have spent time getting to know yourself.
Yeah.
Right. So you know what works for you.
Yeah.
What you said about caffeine and you knowing that finishing before 10 a.m. works for you. Mm-hmm. I think there's a wider point here, Tara, which I'd love your perspective on, but there's this kind of this idea that we'll hear coffee is good or bad. Okay, the research shows that 2 cups of coffee a day does this for your health. It's the biggest source of polyphenols in the American diet. We read all this stuff and then we go, yeah, so coffee's good. Well, it kind of depends.
Yeah.
Right? If you're chronically stressed, overworking and anxious and you're using caffeine to prop you up, I don't think it matters how many polyphenols it's given you. Like, it's probably not going to be good for you in the context of your life. But for someone else, and to be clear, I drink coffee. Like, I think that, caffeinated drinks can absolutely form part of a healthy, balanced life.
I completely agree.
But you've got to tune into yourself and figure out what works for you, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely agree. I mean, there is some evidence that a small amount of caffeine is actually like beneficial for your, your brain as well. It's just like, it's the too much and the, what time that's the issue.
Yeah. We touched on nature earlier. We haven't gone into depth on nature. And there's a term you texted me about yesterday, neuroaesthetics, which I thought that is a wicked term. I haven't heard of it.
Okay.
So we've been talking a lot about stress, right? And the damaging effects of too much stress.
Mm-hmm.
One of the antidotes is nature, right?
So neuroaesthetics is basically the science of the impact of beauty on our brains, on our health, our mental health, and our longevity. And so within that, you're frowning.
No, I'm thinking, I'm taking it in because I love it. And I've never heard the term before. I absolutely love it.
Yeah.
The impacts of beauty.
Yeah.
I love it.
So it basically says that making or beholding creative activities is good for your health. So that's art, dance, music, and it's both doing a painting or going to an art gallery. It's both, singing in the shower and going to see a musical. And it's both dancing around your living room or going to the ballet. And there are, differential benefits of making and beholding. Both are good for you, but, ideally you would do a bit of both. And so within that, you and I might have the same taste in art, but different taste in music. But nature is the palette that we have existed in since the beginning of time. And so we all feel a sense of beauty when we're in nature. And, we know that when we're in nature, our blood pressure goes down, our heart rate goes down. There are certain trees that secrete chemicals called phytoncides that boost the natural killer cells in our immune system. So there's a lot of good stuff going on when we're in nature. And yeah, that's pretty much it. That, basically thinking of nature as like a beautiful, scenario, and understanding that beauty and creative activities are so beneficial to us. And if you think about it, when we lived in the cave, we lived with the seasons, we looked at the stars in the sky at night, we walked barefoot like you try to, and we danced around the fire, we beat drums, we chanted, and people, once it went dark, it's not like you could be hunting or whatever, but it's, people there was no excess time for luxurious activities. When you lived in the cave, it was all about survival. So we really believe that these sorts of activities are somehow crucial to our survival, whether it's the social connection or whether it is like the benefit on your cardiovascular system of, lowering your blood pressure and heart rate.
Yeah, it's a beautiful idea. It's a reassuring idea. We all feel good when we're in the forest or in nature.
Yeah.
Right? Generally speaking, it's hardwired into us, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
For a number of reasons. I don't know if you've read the book by Daka Keltner, or he's a Berkeley professor. He's been studying happiness for 20 plus years, and he released a book about a year ago. I think it was called Awe, or The Science of Awe. You'd love it, right? And
I'll look into it.
Really unpicked what happens to humans when we experience awe, which of course we do in nature, right? And it lowers stress. It improves mental well-being, improves physical health. I think it is related with longevity as well, which is absolutely incredible, isn't it?
Yeah.
So how much nature does one need to get these benefits?
I mean, in the field of neuroaesthetics, they say ideally 20 minutes a day of, either a creative activity, making it or beholding it, or being in nature. Personally, when I, used to like go for a walk in the woods every day, and for like, just physical purposes, I would do 30 minutes. When I started doing an hour, the effect on my mental health was so noticeable. It was incredible. I didn't realize it would make that much difference. And we don't always have the luxury of being able to go for a 1 hour walk. But both physically and mentally, I could tell the difference between half an hour and an hour.
Wow.
And I can also tell the difference between walking for an hour in really beautiful nature, like in ancient woods, versus walking for an hour by the river in London?
Which is better?
Definitely the, really beautiful nature, like no concrete jungle.
The difficulty there, of course, is that the world is becoming more and more urbanized. Many people are living in mega urban environments.
Yeah.
And, a lot of the time, it's people in deprived communities, right, who we know have worse health outcomes anyway, for a variety of different reasons. And I think it's important to acknowledge that, I'm lucky. I live in Cheshire, right? There's nice nature everywhere. It's very easy within 5 minutes of my house to get that nature.
Yeah.
But not everyone has that, right?
No.
So for that person who doesn't have it, what would you say to them?
So even just having more plants in your house is, has the effect that I mentioned of the trees in the forest. Yeah, you're doing well.
We're trying to in this studio.
Yeah. And, one of the examples that the neuroaesthetic researcher that I spoke to gave was just having a small vase of flowers by your bed so that when you wake up, that's the first thing that you smell and see. That's a neuroaesthetic day starting, with a real piece of beauty. It is harder if you're living in an urban environment, but there are amazing parks in most cities.
Yeah.
So trying to get to them. But even just, noticing the trees that you can see in the skyline kind of thing, or a body of water.
Yeah, it makes a difference. I've seen research on fractals, which are these, of course, as you know, these geometric shapes that we only get in nature, that when a human eye sees a fractal, you lower levels of the stress hormone cortisol, right? So I think that's one of the many reasons why nature is so powerful, right? And there's research also showing that just looking at a picture of nature will lower levels of cortisol. I don't think it's to the same degree, but it still does it.
I was going to say that. I was going to say, if you really literally cannot get to a park near your house, then it's probably not as good. But if you look on your phone or on, TV or whatever, and just look at naturescapes. One of the things I'm planning to do later this year is release a series of meditations, guided meditations with my voice, but that are played over some really stunning nature time-lapse photography.
I love it. Look forward to that. Might become part of my morning routine.
Yeah.
I want to talk about death, Tara. I've watched quite a few of your interviews recently online, and they've been truly, truly fascinating. And death is something I've seen you talk more and more about over the past, I'd say, year, maybe. Why is that?
Yeah, I would say a year or two, because you know how at the beginning of the pandemic, I said to you, I feel like this is potentially a mental health crisis. What I came out of it feeling like was there were so many people that experienced loss. And I do mean, loss through actual death of loved ones, but also a lot of relationships broke down. A lot of people, really suffered during the pandemic, either because they were isolated or, things in the way that they work changed. So that loss of sense of self. So I feel like there's a lot of suffering in the world at the moment. And I also feel like we are more lost and disconnected than I think we've ever been before. And so as part of, my personal spiritual practice, I made season 2 of my podcast more about ancient wisdom because I wanted to learn about Sufism and, South African traditional healers and, Tibetan Buddhist beliefs and things. Yeah. So, but as part of that, actually our friend in LA, Drew, he suggested a guest for my podcast who was a Austrian doctor called Alexander Bathiani who works on terminal lucidity. And terminal lucidity is when people who have some kind of brain damage or reduced consciousness because they've had a stroke or they've got dementia suddenly become lucid, completely lucid. So people who've forgotten that they even had children suddenly remember the names of their children and tell them that they love them and have a conversation with them that was like completely normal until a few years ago. And that really got me thinking about whether it's possible that consciousness can exist outside of our physical body. Basically, is your spirit still around somewhere after you've physically died? And then there was this documentary on Netflix, Surviving Death. So I kind of went down a rabbit hole. You know, I get into a topic and then I get into it. But I felt very passionately that this could bring a lot of comfort to people. And something else, which I'll come on to. So after I interviewed Alexander, I said to Drew, this fascinating topic. And he gave me another guest who is a professor of psychiatry from the University of Virginia who works on near-death experiences. So these are people who, you know, their heart stopped and the number of minutes that went by is enough that we would know the brain was starting to decay. But they somehow returned to physical life and could describe the experience that they had had. He's also got a colleague that works on past life memories, but I haven't been able to speak to him, but he works with children who remember being somebody else before. And then I spoke to a Tibetan doctor who does dark retreats, which is the closest experience to a near-death experience that you can have without actually nearly dying. So you're in complete darkness for 7 days and 7 nights. And actually the monks do it for 49 days.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So that led me, what it's led me into thinking is, you know, you said to me that you're very interested in intuition at the moment. I've been interested in intuition for a long time, but all of this, you know, potential research that can't prove anything, but points to the fact that the mind and the brain could be separated makes me, I mean, the way that Dr. Grayson put it is that the brain is essentially filtering down the mind because the mind is capable of so much, but to survive in this material world, we can't be overwhelmed like that. So the brain actually makes our mind fit for purpose for this material world. So if you think about the fact that bats and dolphins can see and hear things that we can't see, that means a biological model has a range in their consciousness that's outside of our range. So if we believe that it's true that the mind is being filtered down by the brain, is it possible for us to expand our consciousness in this life, in this lifetime, in this world? And, you know, he said that, again, bringing us back to the ancient wisdom, that the Greeks and the Egyptians, they had people that discovered that, and they were the seers. You know, they were the people that predicted the future or, you know, knew if someone was going to die or become unwell. So I'm just very fascinated by this fact that I didn't think that the ancient wisdom and all of the kind of death stuff would be, you know, potentially connected. But, you know, I am tempted to look into things like telepathy and extrasensory perception and, you know, from a neuroscience point of view, always with that lens of trying to explain it to people in a way that might help them. And, you know, not wanting to be too woo-woo, really wanting to see if I can create that same balance that I did with the source.
Yeah. I mean, that was a great book and you did such a wonderful job. As you say, at creating that balance, there was a scientific rigor there as well, you know, which is very important, I think, for many people. Do you know Anil Seth? He's a bona fide neuroscientist who spent decades studying consciousness. And when he came on my podcast last year, we spoke about near-death experiences.
Oh, okay.
Just, we touched on it. And, you know, because you can't ignore the reports. There's plenty.
Yeah, there's thousands.
There's so many people who are reporting these experiences.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are saying that it's changing how they experience the world.
Yeah.
They come back from it and they're making different decisions. They know what's important now, right? And he was great because he said, listen, these things have really powerful meanings. And I don't want to, he didn't want to take away from that. But he also said, well, but you could also explain them through the lens of the visual cortex getting less oxygen. Sorry to interrupt. If you're enjoying this video and want to learn more, you can download my free special guide containing 6 simple breathing practices that will help you calm your mind, lower stress, and improve your energy. To get hold of this guide, all you have to do is click on the link in the description box below. Because he says often what people will describe is a white light that's very focused. Well, he goes, well, if your visual cortex is having less oxygen to it, the periphery of your vision starts to shut down. So he was, he was great.
And people do say it's like a tunnel as well, which also makes sense from what he said.
So he was kind of saying, well, both things can be true. There can be a physiological, biological explanation, and it can have a transformative effect on people. I guess he would probably, and I don't want to speak for him, stop short of some of the things that you're talking about. As someone who has been to medical school, who has lectured at MIT, who is a neuroscientist, it's really interesting to me that you just spoke about those things on a microphone. Would you have done that 5 years ago?
No.
Why?
Well, 5 years ago, I think I'd written the source, but it hadn't come out yet. And so at that stage, by writing it, I was like, yeah, so I can use cognitive science to explain things like manifestation and visualization. But I was still unsure about whether those two things should be together in my career as a scientist, and particularly as representing MIT. It was when the book came out, the response that it got, that really had a big impact on me. So, it had an impact on me to see that I could make sense of things like that with cognitive science, but it had more of an impact on me, the sort of comments that I got from both from people I know and, just on Instagram. And I think the pandemic, you could say, allowed or pushed me further down the spiritual route. I also have a friend who used to be a client of mine who I met at MIT when he took my class, who's got this like eclectic, fascinating background with a lot of spiritual knowledge. And we started speaking a lot. That got me really interested. So I would have to say with that, I'm going to answer your question with something that we've discussed, which was my intuition told me I cannot keep doing corporate work. I have to go down this road. I still can't tell you why. But I think, it's becoming a bit clearer. And also, I think something that's been really helpful for me is that I have a lot of icons who are either a doctor or a scientist or both that have gone down a very spiritual path. Deepak Chopra, Daniel Siegel, Bruce Lipton. And I remember when I was younger thinking, like, why have they done that? Or how could they have done that? Or, and now it makes sense to me because it's a natural persuasion for me, but also I've got evidence of these, other people. And I think it is because I love science, but it's possible that it is reducing our human experience.
I talk a lot about health and well-being, and, we often talk about food and exercise and sleep and stress, which of course are all very, very important. But what I really like about your approach is that you talk a lot about how important our thoughts are, how important our mind is. And I don't feel that gets enough airtime when we talk about health and well-being. Why is it that our thoughts are so important?
So I actually think that the pillars that you talk about, like sleep, diet, exercise, mindfulness, they're important to improve the quality of our thoughts. Because if you actually think about it, why are you doing those things? You're not just doing it so that your body is in good shape. You're doing it so that you can think more clearly, you can do your job better, you can have better relationships. And all of that really boils down to how you think. So all the physical factors put your brain in good condition, and then it's what you do with it that really counts.
Yeah, I guess it's it works both ways, doesn't it? Because I guess, you know, paying attention to these physical factors helps your brain function, helps you think more clearly. But at the same time, I guess if you change your mindset and you work on your thoughts, it can make it easier to actually do a lot of these physical things we're talking about.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the chapters in the book is about that brain-body connection. So I think because psychology was around for a long time before we could scan brains and bodies, it left us with this sort of idea that there's a cut-off at the neck and that what you think and feel isn't connected to what goes on in your body and vice versa. But absolutely, if you're cold or hungry or tired, it affects the quality of thinking. And if you're confident or anxious, it affects the nerves and hormones in your body.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this whole brain-body connection that you do beautifully talk about in the book is so important. And I guess for me, it's something that's really been missing in my medical training. It's something that I think has been missing for a long time in medicine, particularly 20th century medicine, the way we've, you know, the way medicine really, really evolved to do so many great things. But I think we've lost that idea that really, I guess, people have known for donkey's years. Was that one of your frustrations with medicine?
I heard you speaking about that on another one of your podcasts, and it absolutely resonated with me. I was almost relieved to hear you say it, to feel like I'm not the only one. And you'll notice that I sort of started the book by talking about how we evolved and the fact that once we developed this cortex, which is much more, you know, a modern part of the brain that we use for articulated speech and for predicting and planning for the future, the part of the brain that had got us to that point, the intuitive, emotional part of the brain, sort of seemed to be downgraded by society, you know, like logic and being able to speak suddenly became important, and gut feeling and emotions just became less important.
Yeah, I totally agree that there is that societal narrative, isn't it? Isn't there, that, you know, logic is key, and intuition sort of gets marginalised, and feelings get marginalised. What I think you've done so well, and obviously you're very well trained, you know, huge scientific backgrounds. You have brought some of these ideas that have been there before to life, but you've got some scientific grounding in them now. And one of your, you know, I guess one of your core concepts is, how do we create the life that we want? How do we be in charge of what happens to our life, rather than let life sort of happen to us? Is that something you feel you've always had an inkling towards, or is this something that has really evolved in your thinking in the past few years?
It's funny you should say that, because as I look back now, it feels like a lot of the concepts in the book were always there in the way that I lived my life. But even since writing the book, I've come up with this new analogy, which is, let's say you and I want to go on a journey. Would you rather be sitting in the passenger seat and I choose where we go and the route that we take, or would you rather be driving and choosing the destination? It's kind of like that in life. It's very easy to go through the motions every day and let life happen to you. But if you think about it, if we stop and step back, we have a lot more choice in what we tolerate, in what happens to us, in the choices that we make, than we necessarily think. 'Cause it's easy to just sort of go on autopilot.
And I think that's something that really does happen these days, doesn't it? Many people are living life on a treadmill, day to day, week to week, before you know, another year's gone by. And I think one of the issues is that people don't have time. They don't feel that they can actually, separate off some time where they reflect internally. They reflect on their own life and their journey. It's just sort of something I know. I've talked about this a little bit before. I've certainly written about it. That we're recording this podcast yesterday was 6 years to the day since my dad passed away, and that was because I used to care for my dad for a long period of time. That's why I moved back to the Northwest to help my mum and my brother care for dads. And what's really interesting is, since my dad died, I suddenly had a lot of time. All that time that I would spend caring and trying to look after the family, I would reflect on his life, I would reflect on my upbringing, and it really helped me understand wait a minute, am I living the life that I want to live? And actually, you can literally mirror my happiness, the things that have gone well in my career, literally since the moment my dad died. And it's a real clash for me. On one hand, I wish my dad was still here. But on the other hand, if dad was still here, I don't think I'd be doing any of the things that I'm doing currently because I would be too busy. I don't know how that sounds to you.
So that sounds to me like, he lives on through having given you this gift, which is the new life that you've chosen for yourself. And I feel exactly the same, that, I wish I'd never got divorced, but it was at that exact time that I thought, okay, something's happened to me that I hadn't factored in. Now what do I do with my life? And it was the absolute turning point of then choosing my career, where I lived, what I wanted to do, who I wanted in my life. And, it's ended up with me writing this book.
Yeah, well, I guess that's quite empowering for people, isn't it? Instead of looking at something, and maybe if we've got time, we'll explore what, how the divorce changed you. But, getting divorced for many is, it's clearly can be a very traumatic episode in one's life. It can cause a lot of negative feelings, a lot of frustration, lots of kind of things can happen that can actually, unless they're turned into being a positive, unless that is used as a sign to say, hey, look, what can I learn about this? How can I move on from this? Often people can go in a downward spiral. So, look, there's so much we can talk about. I want to really get into the meat of this book, which is really good. It's called The Source. What is The Source?
Okay, so the source is your fully integrated brain power. So we've touched on it by saying logic is, really key in society and emotions and intuition maybe are less valued. Well, the source is basically mastering your emotions, knowing your body and listening to messages from your body, trusting your gut, which is your intuition, making good decisions, which is your logic, which is super important, staying motivated and resilient to achieve your goals, and then really taking on that ownership of creating your life. So it's 6 ways of thinking, and it's about doing all of those, not sort of, thinking, well, I'm very logical, so I'll mostly rely on just making good decisions, and I'll neglect the fact that I may get burnt out or that I may lose sight of what I really want in life. It's about keeping all 6 of those sort of fires burning at the same time.
It sounds wonderful. Is it achievable for people?
I think that if you don't know that those are the key 6 ways of thinking, then you're unlikely to sort of suddenly find out and create this idea for yourself. But I've laid it out almost like a map. And so now I think people can sit down and think, okay, how much do I listen to my body? How much do I trust my intuition? Do I sometimes, lose it with my emotions, and what could I do about that? And sort of just work through the 6. And I've worked successfully with business people over the last 10 years, going through those 6 ways of thinking. And of course, I've done it myself. And, literally, if I have a sort of an acute problem at hand, I think, okay, what's going on emotionally? What's my body telling me? And I work through the 6, and now it's become more natural.
Yeah, absolutely. Right at the start of the book, there was this section where you outline a series of questions. If you find yourself nodding your head, this book is for you. And I thought it was brilliant. I won't read them all out, but some of these statements are, for example, I feel stuck in an unhappy long-term relationship and can't see a way out. That's something very, very common that I see in my practice. I feel desperate to meet someone so that I'm not the last childless person in my group of friends. God, I've got so many people I know who feel like that. I agonize over what decisions to make. I've never asked for a pay rise or promotion. My work bores me, but it pays the bills. You could be describing, maybe 80% of the people that walk through my door as a GP. So I think, in many ways, what you're saying is if you resonate with those statements, which I think many people will, the book is for them. So if someone has nodded their head to one of those statements, they think, okay, fine, I'm interested. What are the practical steps that they can take? How do they start doing this?
Okay, so the book is really practical. In fact, the last 4 chapters are all totally practical exercises. They involve some meditations and sort of visualizations, but throughout the book, I ask people to start journaling. So how you talked about that time to step back and reflect? It can seem like a really big sacrifice to think, okay, I'll take a weekend or a week or a month to reflect on my life. But if you start journaling for a few minutes each day, I found that looking back over that and reading it was just so insightful. I could see where I was repeating the same patterns. I could see what happened when I was feeling really confident and happy and how different that was to when I was feeling a bit down and uncertain of the future. And that helped me massively. So I think if people read the book, start the journaling, absolutely do a vision board, and we can talk about the
Definitely
science.
going to talk about the vision board for sure.
With things like that, it was really important for me to make the science around it really clear, so that it's not just another nice thing to do. It's you understand why you're doing it and how it can change your life. And then, as I said, there are 4 chapters of exercises which you could complete in 4 weeks or 4 months or as long as you like. But I think that by the time people get to the end of having done those, I'll be amazed if you are nodding at any of those statements that happen at the beginning of the book.
That's very powerful and seductive sell for people. It really. But I absolutely agree. I think there are some really powerful tools in your approach. I just want to touch on journaling. So I'm aware that you know journaling, I know what journaling is, but some people listening to this may have heard that term but may not really understand, well, what is it? How do I journal? So, if someone has never done this before and they want to, how might they start?
So you literally get a blank sort of diary, and you can start by just saying what happened to you today. So, I could literally say, I woke up earlier than usual, feeling a bit grumpy, went to, meet Rongan and do this podcast, immediately cheered up. And even just in that little snippet, what you've realised is maybe if I don't get enough sleep, that it affects my mood. Maybe if I'm with somebody who I really respect and have fun with, that improves my mood. You've learnt something already just by recording that. Over time, you can get down to talking about things like emotions and intuition. You're basically talking to yourself. You're recording it to look at later. So you might say, I had an argument with this person and this is how it left me feeling. I wish I hadn't said X. If something like this happened again, this is what I'd choose to do in future. So you basically use the journal as a way to sort out your thoughts, to get them out of your head and sort of be able to look at them more objectively and create a narrative that you can look back at and make certain different decisions about your future.
I mean, some people who recommend journaling say that they do it, but they never look back on what they've written down. Yet you're saying you do actually go back and look. Is there merit to different approaches there?
I'm sure it's very individual, and I never intended to go back and look. But I do these 2 trips to America twice a year. And just out of curiosity, I read back over the trip from 6 months ago when I was there. And I'd been having these little sort of muscular twitches. And to my, surprise, I saw that I'd recorded that in my journal 6 months ago. And so I basically worked out that the travel, the jet lag, the sort of stress of being away meant that I needed to take more of my magnesium supplements. And it was just a real eye-opener. And then I thought, well, what would happen if I looked at the more emotional stuff that I've written down? What could I discover? And to me now, I would say that reading back over your journal is actually more helpful than just writing it.
Yeah, wow, incredible. I do journal from time to time. I haven't made it a constant daily practice, but I go through periods of time in my life where for a few days, a few weeks, I will journal. And I personally like doing it first thing in the morning as part of my morning routine. And, I wonder if you know about this as a neuroscientist, but I'm not entirely sure, but sometimes I feel, you've been in a deep sleep, you've woken up, there's so much going around in your subconscious. And when you just start writing first thing in the morning, I sort of feel that what I'm doing is I'm just helping to process my subconscious mind and get it out onto paper. So as you say, it's getting out of my head and onto paper. And one of the big problems I see these days is that people are living in their heads. They've got all kinds of anxieties, fears, insecurities rushing around their brain. But the simple act of writing it out, in some way, quite literally, takes it from your brain and out, onto paper.
Well, I fully believe that just like doing aerobic exercise can help you to reduce levels of the stress hormone cortisol, that speaking out loud or writing down these thoughts that are racing round and round in your head, instead of suppressing them or just letting them build up, till it feels like your head's going to explode, is a way of reducing stress. So actually, if you've got anxieties or negative thoughts and you write them down, or you have somebody that you trust that you can talk to, it gets it out of your brain-body system, just exactly like exercising can release stress hormones from your brain-body system.
although we talked about vision boards last time, Tara, I think people really like that idea. And I wonder if we could just sort of, because I feel at the moment, if someone's doing that and thinking, oh, I like this, I like that, could they potentially use a vision board here to, put their attention there and maybe increase the chances of that happening at some point in the future?
That's actually such a good idea, because in a way, I was thinking, the vision board that I created in January for 2020, there are simply some things on it that can't happen now. Some of them can happen remotely. So, I think I did say to you last time that doing a podcast with you was on my vision board last year. And, getting to do one with you again is just so wonderful. And, doing more podcasts was on my vision board because we're changed it. So I've sort of been saying to people, don't put too much pressure on yourself to, feel that you need to achieve the visions that you had at the start of the year, or, it may be difficult to create a vision board now, but I think you've just hit the nail on the head. The vision board could be how I want my life to be different given what I've learned during lockdown. So I've actually been collecting images that I like, but they're all very colourful, very exotic. And I think it's sort of, although I will never travel for work as much as I did ever again, that's a promise I've made to myself, and I've said it in public now. I feel very, very lucky that I've travelled as much as I have for pleasure. There are a few places that I'd still like to go, but I think, my heart and my spirit or whatever is like longing for these faraway places and these different foods and people that I might, not get to experience again as much as I have in the past. But I love this idea of using because, I call it an action board because it has to be backed up by action, of creating an image of the life that you would, the balanced life that you would want when things return to, or go to however they're going to be, and they're not like they are now. Because one of the things I worried about early on in lockdown is that it would be so easy to just get sucked back into being in that rat race, commuting, traveling, not spending, quality time with your loved ones, or not doing the walking in nature. So I think a vision board is, I'm going to do it after today. And also, I have to say to you that you said you were going to do a vision board after the last podcast, and I haven't seen a picture of it.
That's a good point. I did actually start it, but I don't think I finished it. So I will tell you what this morning when I was thinking about chatting to you, and I have been thinking, and again, it's that sort of accountability because I knew I'd be talking to you. I was thinking, okay, Rongan, if you really do want to change certain aspects of your life afterwards, and I'm always thinking at the moment, how can I combine what I do with my children and my wife? Because then we're doing something together. So then it's not either spend time with them or work or do personal growth. But, it's kind of like, well, let's do something together. And then I sort of felt, well, maybe, at the weekend, or they've got their half term coming up shortly, maybe the four of us together should try and create a vision board, and they can do whatever they want, whatever their focus is. I would never want to put that onto them, but mine might be, what kind of life do I want to live post lockdown? Yeah. Because I like you travel a lot. Now, I think I was very mindful of when I was back, spending quality time, undistracted time with my family. But yeah, I've realized that maybe I was traveling more than I ideally wanted. Yeah. So for people, Tara, because we have a lot more listeners now than we did when you first came on the show, which is fantastic. Like, someone might be listening going, vision board, I'm skeptical, right, number one. And they might also be thinking, well, how do I actually do that? So although we did cover some of that last time, I always think a little refresher on why a vision or an action board, why it can be helpful, and how do you actually do it?
Yeah, so the science behind why it's helpful is that we're bombarded with so much information all the time. So, everything we read, everything we see, every person we interact with, and even our own emotions and memories. And so there's a natural process in the brain to selectively filter what's important to our survival and selectively put attention onto what's important for us to thrive. And then there's also another system in the brain called value tagging, which puts those things in order of importance. And there's a there's a logical element to that, things I need to do today to live and work. And then there's an emotional element to that, which is, the spending time with your family and having, feeling comfortable with who you are and, all that sort of thing that you've already mentioned. And so if you create imagery that represents the things like how you want your life to be post-lockdown, then you're more likely to notice and grasp opportunities to make that a reality. So that's all it is. It's not, it's not as woo-woo as some people, the skeptics might think it is. It's literally priming your brain to remember what's important. And so ideally it's a collage made by hand, although, I've been getting a lot of DMs from people saying, well, I'm not getting magazines. So how do I do it? And you can do it on Pinterest. There's an app called Corkulus, which is like a cork board. There are ways on Google of just generating images of things.
What exactly? Okay, so let's just break it down even further. So what, you've got a collage. Okay, so you've got a piece of paper or some card. And what exactly are you wanting or suggesting that people put on it? Is it just images? Is it words? How many do you need? I guess I'm asking semi for myself as well, because I've forgotten from last time. And I am going to do it this time. And I am going to text it to you. So, yeah. Yeah,
so I suggest that you don't use words or numbers. So it's visual imagery, because that tracks to your subconscious more strongly. Also, ideally that it's metaphorical representations of what you want. So, so a sort of, for travel, it could be, just an image of a very exotic place that you like the look of. For you, it sounds like, that very central on the board would be something to do with the four of you. As I said last time, if you want a life that's crammed full, then you should have as many images as you can on that piece of card. If you want some space in your life, then the images could be more separate with space between them. It's important which images are touching each other. So where you've said, let's do stuff together, you may find a way to combine work with, with either with your wife or even with your children doing something with you. Then you'd want those sections of the board to be near each other. There's a whole chapter in the book on exactly how to do it, where to place it, how it works. Yeah. But it is, it's like those collages or scrapbooks that we used to make as children, or what people call mood boards, which is images that you're attracted to, images that represent something that you want. I'm honestly going to redo mine based on what you said, which is about how I'd like my life to look after lockdown, because I did have this feeling, I feel better about it now, but I did have this feeling that I don't 100% trust myself not to just go back to how things were before. Yeah. And I know that I don't want that. But I just also realised that it can be very easy for that to happen. I mean, what sort of came into my mind was when I'd been travelling in Nepal and, just trekking for days and days and sort of eating very simple food and, being very immersed in that Buddhist and Hindu culture. And I remember I came back and I went into a shop and it was all about, just indulge yourself, buy all these things. And I was quite horrified by it. But what I noticed was that 2 weeks later, that was completely normal to me. So, we adapt quickly. But I just think that having agency over that adaptation is really important.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. It reminds me of, I was chatting to a really good mate of mine, Jeremy, recently, about what's it things going to be like afterwards. We're going to remember all this. And he says, and he loves reading history books. And he said, mate, listen, when all the history books I read seem to suggest that after things like pandemics or wars, people want to forget as quickly as possible and get back to normal. Mm-hmm. And obviously for me, I knowingly don't really know, or I don't really have that experience. I didn't live through the wars. I haven't been around during the time of a pandemic. So it feels so real at the moment. I find it hard to believe that we'll forget this. But if we look at history to sort of learn some lessons, it looks as though we very much might do. And that's why I think writing down your thoughts at the moment, maybe if you're so inclined, making an action board, some way of reminding you of some of these key lessons that you learnt and what you want to keep in your life afterwards. I think it's really important.
Yeah. I think it's also important to say, though, that, I do believe that we've forgotten a lot of the lessons that people must have learned during the wars and the aftermath of that. But if you think about the way that the role of women changed during the war. So, the men went off to war and women took up jobs that traditionally weren't seen as jobs that women could do, like factory jobs or farming jobs. And so, that changed forever. So, there are some things that have fundamentally changed and never gone back to how they were before. But, you talk about awareness and I talk about intention.
Sorry to interrupt. If you're enjoying this video and you want to learn more, then do check out my free special guide, which contains the 6 crucial steps you need to take in your life to not only build healthy habits, but also to make them stick. If you want to get hold of this free guide, all you have to do is click on the link in the description box below.
Those 2 words are key here, because if we don't set the intention and maintain our awareness, we won't be choosing what changes fundamentally forever.
And I think that really is key. And again, some people may go, you know what? I liked my life before. I want to go back to that. And I don't think any one of us is saying, don't do that. We're simply saying, be intentional with your choices. Understand that they are choices. I certainly hope for most people they're choices. I do appreciate that some people have to do things that they don't want to do, or certainly feel as though that's their only option. But I think that's a really great lesson. Tara, I want to sort of finish off by something we hinted at a little bit before. And I think it's a topic that's worth exploring. And I've got to be honest, I wasn't that aware of it until I had a bit of a team meeting on Monday with various members of my team, people who helped me with the podcast and various things. And we were just doing this check-in, seeing how everyone's feeling, which is how we always start off. And there was a bit of anxiety. Now, that anxiety was around, you can remember Sunday night, as we're recording this conversation, on, 5 days ago, Sunday night, Boris Johnson made his speech in the UK about how we may start to ease lockdown measures. And a lot of my team and a lot of people I've spoken to have a bit of anxiety. They're like, oh, I've sort of got used to this new normal. The thought of going back to life at 90 miles an hour, it's actually causing a lot of anxiety and fear. And, since my awareness got tuned into that because of what they said, it was really interesting that it's not quite related, but I've been cycling a lot with the kids, and my daughter's only 7, but I've been taking her on the road. So it's been like, there's hardly anyone on the road. So I'm trying to teach her and my son, to the same degree about road safety and how you cycle on the roads. And this week, it has been noticeable how much busier the roads are. Even though not that much has changed, mentally, something has changed in society in terms of what we feel. There is this idea, this widespread belief now that lockdown now we're on lockdown light compared to what it was anyway. And I was scared yesterday. I was like, oh man, I used to take them on these roads, but cars are going by fast. People are looking at their phones whilst they're driving. And I also thought, oh no, we're getting back to normal. Things are starting to seep back. So I know a lot of people listening to this will be feeling that. I wonder if you've got any advice for people who are feeling anxious about society returning back to normal and how they can cope with that.
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I was asked a different version of that question maybe a month ago, when it didn't look like it was easing, and people were like, how long are we going to have to stay like this? And I think that it's the perspective that you apply to it that can be really, really helpful here. So if you were thinking, is lockdown going to end next week? Is it going to be 3 weeks? When are the children going to go back to school? Is it going to be half term? Is it going to be, summer holidays? That creates a lot of anxiety. If you set the goalpost a bit further, so if you tell yourself, I'm not going to think about this for a month, or I think things will only go back to normal in September or October, whatever you think it is. But if you move the goalpost further, then you're not driven to feel as anxious because it's something that's further away. And what that produces is, if you keep thinking, can I go back to normal next week? And then it doesn't happen, and Boris says that's not going to happen, you'll get disappointed. if you put the goalpost further away, then it's more likely that you'll be pleasantly surprised. So it is about giving yourself perspective. And I have a little exercise that I do when I feel that I'm either getting into a rut or I'm starting to think about something very short term and it can build up some anxiety, is that I either look at the palm of my hand or I go outside and I look at a leaf or a flower very close up for a minute, which I time on my phone. And I look at every detail of it and, I immerse myself in that for a minute. And then I will time the minute again and I'll look at a really big tree or a building far away in the distance. And I find it really helps my brain go from that short-term anxious mode into the sort of bigger picture, perspective about this whole situation. So that's my little tip for that.
I like that a lot. I love that. I've not heard that sort of looking at something in very close to you, like a leaf, and then suddenly going to that big, wide peripheral view. That's a really nice. There's a nice analogy there, isn't there? It's really, yeah. I'm definitely going to try that for sure. What you said there actually reminds me of a chat I had just a few days ago. A really good friend of mine runs a fitness business. I won't say too much, but she runs a fitness business, and has been going through some hard times, and obviously has not been able to run classes over the past however many weeks it has been now, and was actually saying to me that actually, you know what, I know I've needed a break for ages, and actually this is in some ways it's been really good because it's given me that break. But I keep sort of deferring. I keep saying to people who want me to do online classes, I just don't want to at the moment. I want to just rest. And I said, are you okay financially? She said, yeah, I'm fine financially. My partner is able to work through this, and so we're okay. And she said, oh, I'm gonna defer the decision. In a couple of weeks I'll decide, or maybe in 3 weeks I'll decide again. And I said, hey, you know what? If you really know you need this time and financially you're okay, what would the world look like if you said, you know what, I'm not going to restart till September, and then you're not constantly deferring that decision for 2 weeks. So that stress is building. Oh, then it goes off. Stress is building. Then it eases off again. Why not, really take that opportunity to go, if you can, to go, yeah, you know what, I'm not working for the next 2 months. I'm going to recuperate. I'm going to enjoy my time, walks in nature. And again, to really bring it back to something that happened in my life yesterday. So my wife, she produces this podcast and she works very, very hard on it. And yesterday, she was homeschooling the kids a lot. She was super busy, and she was getting, mid-afternoon, it was like sort of frustration in some ways that she hadn't managed to get her work done. And it was building up there. And I said, hey, babe, listen, it maybe just embrace the fact that actually you're not working today. And actually, that it's a day off. And she goes, yeah, I should have done that. But all morning and all after, I've been getting frustrated. So it's sometimes it's about, and I know it's easy with hindsight, but it's sometimes better to go, hey, you know what? I'm having today off, and embrace the fact, and don't constantly think about your emails or your workload. It's, I'm hoping those two stories I shared there may be of some value to somebody listening to this right now.
Yeah, because actually, often we say, oh, well, the benefit of hindsight, it's too late kind of thing. But actually, at the moment, it's not too late, because you can have that day off. You can defer something. I mean, I think your friend in the fitness industry, if they say, okay, I'm not going to work till September, if they change their mind in the meantime, great, fine. But if they don't, they've given themselves permission. And, like we've said repeatedly throughout this, if in whichever way you're privileged to make certain choices, now's the time to make them. And even if it's, you do it a day too late because it's hindsight, but you can still do it. I have one of my favorite phrases is, the best time to plant an oak tree was 200 years ago. The second best time is today.
I love science, right? But science does not explain everything about life. In fact, you can argue that that's the job of science, is to try and understand the reality of life.
Yeah.
And it's a best guess based upon the data you have at that time.
Yeah.
It's not fact. It's not like a proven truth that can never be questioned.
No.
And it often is put out like that these days. It's like, well, sometimes we don't have science to prove something. It's like, yeah, it doesn't mean it's not true. It just means we don't know yet how to explain that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, totally. I mean, 20, 25 years ago, we didn't know about neuroplasticity.
Yeah.
So, but what we knew at the time was the truth at the time, but science is continually evolving.
Just give us a one-liner on neuroplasticity.
So we used to believe that by the time you stopped physically growing, that your brain was then fixed and that it never changed, so that your personality, your IQ, your creativity, those things couldn't change throughout your life. But now we know that the brain actively grows and changes till we're about 25, and that if you take on new experiences, you learn new things, then you can keep, changing your brain. So the fact that the brain is flexible, what we in science terms call plastic. I remember when I was at medical school, which was a bit before you, there was a discovery about the pancreas that we'd never known before. And I remember thinking, humans have had a pancreas for like tens of thousands of years. But we never knew these particular cells that existed in the pancreas.
Yeah. I don't know if you heard this at medical school. We were told in first year by one of our professors that 50% of what you learn is going to be shown to be untrue. The problem is we don't know which 50%.
Oh, no.
But I actually love that, because actually you can either, and as a young, as a young 18-year-old, you probably don't want that uncertainty. You want to believe that you are being told everything, and everything you're being told is the truth.
Yeah.
But I actually think that pattern misserves our profession. I think there's a lot of doctors out there who still believe that everything they learnt at medical school is absolutely true.
Yeah.
And things have moved on. Some of it is, some of it's partially true. Some of it is not quite true in the way we learnt it. We've evolved our understanding.
Yeah.
So you have to be okay with not knowing. You have to be okay with thinking, well, there's something more here. Yeah. I mean, let's just go back to death for a minute, Tara, right? Because I think what you said is really interesting. My first real experience with death was when my dad died, just over 10 years ago now.
Mm-hmm.
And I was a mess for a long time, because looking after dad was my identity. So it was a huge hole for me. It's the first time I'd ever really had to deal with death.
Yeah. Personally.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, the last year has been incredibly challenging for me. For a number of reasons. As we record this, 12 months ago today, Mum was actually pretty good.
No.
And on Christmas Day last year, everything took a turn for the worse.
Yeah.
She went into hospital for 3 weeks, and since she's come out, she's not the same as she was. And it's interesting, as we come up to that 1 year point, I was reflecting yesterday of how different my life was 12 months ago, because I live very near to Mum and I see her most days.
Yeah.
And when she was in hospital, she had delirium. So she was in A&E for 3 days. The hospitals were slammed, and it was such a traumatic experience to see someone, if people have seen delirium, I've seen it in patients.
Yeah.
It's clearly a different matter when you see it with your mother.
Yeah.
And then since Mum's come home, which she's been home for ages now, I've really been questioning myself this year as to what is the human experience, right? Because Mum's still there, right?
Yeah.
So I can see her,
Yeah.
I can hold her hand.
Yeah.
I can't talk to her in quite the same way as I used to be able to.
Mm-hmm.
But actually, for the last few months, there's a stability there, and Mum seems really calm to me, right? So she's pretty dependent on help for most things. Well, for everything, frankly. But I've been questioning, what the hell is the human experience, right? Because now when I go and see Mum, it's variable from day to day, but there's a calmness. there's a really beautiful calmness and warm energy. I thank God for much of Mum's life. She's been busy. She had Dad to look after, me and my brothers to look after, go, 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 go. There's a real calm. And I'm experiencing that not through words, through just sitting there and trying to connect with what am I feeling here.
Yeah.
I feel a calmness from my mum who isn't as, she's not the same person, I would say, in some ways as she was 12 months ago. But what does that mean, not the same person?
Yeah.
Well, it still looks like mum. She's still in the same room. I'm still able to go and be with her and enjoy my time with her.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. Help me through all that. What does that mean? What can we learn from these experiences?
I mean, this is exactly the reason that I'm looking into the stuff that I'm doing, because, you know, clearly this is like very upsetting for you. And please don't underestimate how traumatic it is for a doctor to see their own family really sick in hospital. It is, I think, actually worse than if you're not a doctor. And I'm not, you know, belittling anyone else's experience, but when you've been used to being a doctor and caring for people and seeing all sorts of things, there's something extra traumatic about that being one of your loved ones. And, you know, you really need to acknowledge that, because I think that will help you to heal, you know, better than if you didn't think about it like that. So, yeah, so this, you know, that, like I said, there isn't really anyone I know that hasn't lost someone in the last, you know, or, you know, lost in a way, like you said, your mum is still here, but it's not the same. You know, and then there are people who physically aren't here anymore. That as I've looked into death and grief, there does seem to be a period, a sort of a peaceful period that can be for, you know, very varying lengths of time. You know, for some people, it's a matter of days, but it can also go on, you know, for a very long time. And you know what I was thinking, you know, and this is probably something you're going to say, like, really, you said that on a mic, but as you were speaking about your mum and like not necessarily being able to communicate verbally, remember, like, you were physically inside her body at one point. You shared her immune system for the first probably 6 months minimum of your life. You and her can communicate with each other without words. I'm so sure of that. I can't prove it, but that is why I'm doing the research that I'm doing, because I think we are capable of so much more with our consciousness than we know. And I think we've actually forgotten stuff that we knew. And I hope, and please tell me if this is true, that you know, later today or tomorrow when you next go and see your mum, that you might feel that there is some other kind of communication that's possible.
I mean, I'll definitely let you know. I think what this encourages me to do is next time I'm with mum is to just sit there. Like, it's really interesting what I've learned. It's interesting. Like, you can learn through science and knowledge, or you can learn through experience, right? And they're not always the same thing. So I know the science of touch and how powerful, you know, safe, affectionate human touch is, and how these CT afferent nerve fibers go all the way into our limbic system and our emotional brain and help lower cortisol. I wrote a chapter on it in my book in Stress, right? So I know the science of it. But I think you could look at this and go, we default to verbal communication because that's what we're trained in. That's what's easier.
Yeah.
So this is really interesting. I've not really thought about it like this before. Because that is no longer where it used to be. And I can't change that. My only option is, if I want that deep connection, I can't do it with words. So I've made a real effort to not be rushed around mum. When she was more able than she is now, and was walking around and doing her stuff, you know, I was busy and rushing around, and I'd pop in to see mum and do a few things, but I was always rushing to get out and all this kind of stuff, right? But I never do that. Like, I literally never do that anymore.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, no. in fact, last week I was working from home on one day and I was out for a walk. I thought I'd just drop in and see mum for 10 minutes, but I've got to get back. I've got work to do. And mum was having a good day and she said, "Oh, are you going?"
Oh,
I said, "Oh, mum, it's kind of Tuesday. I've got a bit of work to do."
yeah.
Said, "Oh, I said, "Oh, do you want me to stay?" "Oh, yeah, because sometimes I'm just by myself." And you know what? I just thought, you know what? Screw it. I'm just staying here.
Yeah.
And yes, on that day, I was able to make that decision. I recognize as I say that some people are in jobs or they have days in the week, but they can't do that.
Yeah.
But I could.
Yeah.
And I could have made the case to myself, "No, you've got to get this work done." And would it have been better to get that work done?
No.
Well,
absolutely
for my
not.
work, it probably would have done, but for me and my mum, and I'm so aware that there's not many more days like this left.
Yeah.
And so I want to be present for them all.
Yeah.
And just finishing the loop of what I was saying before is I'll just sit there and I'll hold and I'll stroke. Because you can have a deep level of communication through touch.
Yeah.
You absolutely can. And you can sometimes see mum smiling, right? And it's lovely. But I never would have done that in that way if she was speaking. So I like to look at everything in life as an opportunity.
Yes.
But the opportunity of verbal communication is not what it was.
Yeah.
So what's the opportunity? The opportunity is, well, I can get better at communication through skin.
Yeah. But also you can talk to her, right?
Yeah.
Which she would like, even if it's a bit of a monologue sometimes.
It's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah. I think, I imagine that in that state, just things like silly things that the kids did or like, what you cooked for dinner last night. It's if she said, because sometimes I'm on my own, then basically she's probably a bit bored and just wants to hear about normal life. And yeah.
I mean, there's some deep rabbit holes to go down on death for sure.
Yeah.
And I think maybe it's a reflection of getting older and coming across death that makes us actually think about it more, right?
Yeah.
On your last season of your podcast, when you went down this rabbit hole, is there one moment, is there one person, one guest where you heard something where you thought, I didn't know that, I didn't think that was possible, but now you're making me think?
Yeah, it started with Alexander Bathiani, the Austrian psychologist. And actually, I recorded him quite late on, but I brought him up into the number 2 slot because I was so excited about that. And a similar message was kind of repeated by Dr. Bruce Grayson. But, I really pushed him on this point of, can the consciousness exist after physical death? And he said, even my friends and family are like, "It's okay, Alex, you can tell us, we won't tell anyone." And he again said, "It can't be proven, but I have a strong impression." And then he talked for a while and I said, "Yeah, you've just said quite a lot without really saying anything." And he said, "Tara, no one has ever pushed me this hard to actually answer this question." And I said, I'm not going to put words into your mouth, but from what you have just said, I am going to say that the answer to that is yes.
Let's look at this a different way. Does it actually matter? And where I'm coming from with that question is, let's say that this is all nonsense, right? And it's not real, okay? And again, to reiterate, you have said on many times, this can't be proven, right? Or you don't have the proof for it.
No.
This is just
No one does.
Your investigation and research and your passion or whatever it might be. If we think about what you said earlier about the brain, and we were talking about the brain and how it's logging all of our experiences, right? So it may not be conscious, but within our subconscious, we have all this experience.
Yeah.
And therefore, at an appropriate time in my life, maybe it's just all internal and not anything external. You could say that, couldn't you?
You could absolutely say that. What I'm trying to say is, because currently we don't believe that it's possible to have any communication with a lost loved one, right? what if it is possible, but because we don't think it's true, we're not doing it? That's the question that I'm posing.
That's a whole nother podcast in itself, Tara.
I know. And I'm still looking into it. I don't have the answers yet.
And when you do, I look forward to that conversation. Just changing direction slightly at the end of our conversation. A lot of people listen to this show because they want help in leading more meaningful, happier, healthier lives, right? We've covered a lot. I think there's been lots of practical guidance woven in throughout our conversation. I certainly hope so.
Yeah.
To finish off, though, I want to talk about why people struggle to make changes in their life. Let's take New Year's resolutions as an example.
Yeah.
They are notoriously unsuccessful.
Yeah.
Right? What is it? Is it 80% of people who make them by the first week in February are no longer doing them?
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Right? In your opinion, what is the biggest obstacle in people's lives that stops them from moving forward?
That the goal that they've set is too big. And so it's not achievable. So it's not so much to do with the sustainability of it. It's the fact that it's too big in the first place. And therefore the effort that is required for that bigger change is so much effort that you're more likely to give up quickly. So the year that was a game changer for me was the year that I decided to add in 2 or 3 micro habits per quarter. So I started the year and I identified 3 things that I was going to do. And also knowing that some quarters, one of those was just going to fall by the wayside and not actually get incorporated. But what it meant was, because they were such easy things, that by the end of March, I was like, okay, what else can I do? So another 3. And it meant that by the end of the year, I looked back and I had 10 things I was now doing without question that had not been habits the year before. But, when I've set something bigger than that, I don't come to the end of the year and say, oh, I, achieved that New Year's resolution.
So on a kind of rational, conscious mind, practical, through that kind of lens, that is very consistent with what I found in clinical practice. That's very consistent with, let's say, Professor BJ Fogg's research on behavior change from Stanford. This idea that it's tiny habits, it's small changes that actually are the ones that we manage to introduce into our life and make sustainable.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's also the subconscious patterning within us, though, as well. I believe, and this was definitely true for me, that the reason why a lot of behavior change fails, I completely agree about the small habits, but I think one of the reasons, for example, why New Year's resolutions fail is because I think they come from an energy of lack rather than an energy of abundance. Right? So what can I do to punish myself? I'm not good enough at the moment. There's, my life isn't going the way. I need to make this big. Yes.
Yeah.
But also I'm not doing it because I like who I am and I like the person that I am being in the world.
Yeah.
I'm doing it in some way to punish myself.
Yeah.
And I used to do that. I used to be damn good for 21 days on meditation for 20 minutes a day. I'm like, yeah, this year I'm rocking it. I'm doing it. And then I'd miss it one day.
Yeah.
This is a few years back. Oh my God, the self-talk about what a failure I was and how I couldn't even stick to it that year. Right? That I've realized was the issue.
Yeah.
The issue wasn't the meditation. It wasn't the wrong habit. The issue was the energy behind that decision. Whereas now I don't make them. I actually really like who I am. I know that sounds ridiculous, but I don't think I did 10 years ago.
That's good.
I like the person I've had to do a lot of work to get to that point.
Yeah.
So now I don't beat myself up.
Yeah.
And now the changes I choose to make, whether it be in January or July or November, tend to be sustainable because of the energy behind them.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. the lack and abundance point is a really, really good one. And very commonly in my coaching practice, I will see people, miss a day or, miss miss the regularity of the habit and then say, oh, that's it. I've messed that up now. And I'm always like, don't put any energy into beating yourself up. Just start again. Because next time it will be 31 days and then maybe you'll miss a day. And then, next time it will be 41. But I think the point is that when we start, we're like, if I'm doing this, I've got to do it every day. Why do you have to do it every day? Like when you said to me at the start, oh, your daily journaling practice, I thought, I'm not going to lie about that. I don't do it every day, but it is a practice in my life, and that's okay.
Click here for a powerful conversation with an incredible Buddhist monk who's got life lessons to share that will help you immediately with your health and your happiness.
It's only when you learn what to do with your unhappiness that you can really break through and find stable happiness. We are all drowning in addictions and they are all based on distraction. What is it we're trying to distract ourselves from?